When people start to break some veneer or some barrier of what they think is impossible, as people start to pierce that veil, just like the 4-minute mile, more and more people are starting to understand that they can do it as well. I never know what's going to happen. I just know that if we keep giving people numerous opportunities to connect, sooner or later they're going to get beyond themselves and they're going to connect even more. And that's one of the things I learned from all the brain scans that we've studied, is that I think that you and I are at our absolute best when we get beyond ourselves. And there's an elegant moment that takes place, and a formula, in fact, where you can actually teach it. And so people now are starting to connect to that field called the quantum field, and they're beginning to produce effects on matter, and it's happening in a shorter and shorter amount of time. And if it's happening in a shorter and shorter amount of time, that means they're no longer playing by the rules of Newtonian physics, which requires predictability in time. They're doing it from the field, the energy of the quantum, and that process takes place in no time. I think we're living in a time of extreme polarities. I think that things have to be pulled apart. Polarity, if you look at even studies in chaos theory, that there always has to be extreme polarities before there's a reorganization. And everything that is not consistent with a new level of energy or new level of consciousness is going to spiral apart. So think about it. Every system in nature, before it evolves, goes through a period of chaos. It's just the way it is. And so information is what is causing this whole thing to accelerate, because you don't need an authority any longer to gain information. You don't need a priest or a rabbi or a teacher. You don't need a doctor to gain information. Because of technology, information is so accessible. So every time you learn knowledge, you become more conscious of the way things really are. And if you become more aware and you become more conscious, you can't have consciousness without energy. So there's an elevation globally of energy taking place. In fact, if I think back 5 years ago or 10 years ago and I walked out in front of an audience and I had to work to get an audience to a certain level of understanding, those days are over and we'll never go back to that again. Everybody is informed. So that greater level of energy, that greater level of consciousness is causing old systems and old paradigms to begin to spiral out. And so whether you're looking at the environment, politics, economics, religion, education, journalism, medicine, all of those paradigms are beginning to unravel because they're no longer consistent with a greater level of energy. So how then do we face these challenges is the big question, because if we face them in fear, then it's the very emotion and energy of fear that created them in the first place. If we face them with hostility and anger, well, we are going to be reacting and recreating the same outcome. So we have to embrace this understanding, not as in a separate way of like, you're over there and I'm over here, because that's the lie that we've been told, that separation is the way things really are. And in fact, in the quantum, everything is connected by an invisible field of energy, everything material, in fact. So then how do you unify everything material? And it's that elevated emotion called love or gratitude. So then when we begin to come from that level of consciousness, we experience less separation. In fact, our heart begins to open, our field around our body begins to expand, and that field around the body that begins to expand actually touches every other thing that's material from an immaterial place. That means then, when you're feeling love for yourself, or love for life, or love for the moment, every single person that you have a relationship with, if your signal is the strongest, will begin to affect their autonomic nervous system. We know this to be the truth because we've measured this over and over again. We can take a group of 750 people and put them in a room, and we can have 50 people in the front of the room wearing heart rate monitors. Now, it turns out, as you know the Heart Math team over there, Howard Martin, Roland, and Debbie, and all those guys, that when you're frustrated, when you're impatient, when you're resentful, your heart actually beats very, very incoherently. It beats out of order. That's because you're stepping on the gas and the brake at the same time. The survival systems are switching on, the stress hormones are being released, but you're not running, you're not fighting, and you're not hiding. So there's a conflict between the accelerator and the brake, and that's what causes the heart to beat arrhythmically. So then When you switch from those limited emotions to elevated emotions, then you start feeling love and gratitude. All of a sudden, you begin to produce a very coherent magnetic field around your body. That energy is frequency, and all frequency carries information. So if you have 750 people in the room, and you have 50 people in the front of the room wearing the heart rate monitor, and you teach people how to elevate their energy and to open their heart and create coherence, and then lay the thought for the greatest good of everybody sitting in the front of the room, that their lives be enriched, that their bodies be healed, that their dreams come true, that the mystical find them. When you see the majority of those people wearing the heart rate monitors all go into heart coherence at the exact same time, in the exact same day, on the exact same meditation, you have to scratch your head and realize that there is no separation. In fact, it is that energy that binds all of us. So now, how do you change the world then is the next question, because if you're seeing those non-local changes, then those people that are feeling heart coherence, every person they're in a relationship with, that they are networked with, to some measure or some degree, will have an effect on their autonomic nervous system. Well, they'll feel more coherent or more loving in that moment. So then if you get a group of people all doing this around the world, and HeartMath has done great research on Project Coherence to show that, in effect, that it can happen on opposite sides of the world, you get enough people doing that, you start seeing everybody coming from the place of love. Now, what does that do? Something emerges. A new species, a new consciousness emerges, where we're all acting as one mind. The beauty behind those birds and those fish is when you look at them, they look at like one organism. They look like a bigger organism than they really are. The individuals are making up the whole, but they're connected and they're acting as one mind. So then the antithesis is also true. The way you control people and cause them to believe that they're separate is to create the stress hormones, because when stress hormones are released, the opposite happens. You contract. The energy of field around your body is being used. The vital life force is being used and turned into chemistry, and the field around your body shrinks. Now you feel more like matter and less like energy, more like particle and less like wave. The very hormones of stress really endorse our senses, and we become materialists. So if we can't see it or smell it or hear it or taste it or feel it, it doesn't exist. And those chemicals then cause us to feel separation, because our senses fool us into believing you're over there and I'm over here. I'm over here and my dreams are way over there, and I have to drag my body through space to get to my future, and it's going to take time. So our dreams are way out away from us, and it's going to take time for us to get to them. So now, get a community of people together that are all resonating at that frequency, you start to see dramatic changes that will begin to take place in crime rates, in violence, in economic growth as a result of a new energy. Now, but here's the deal. If you measure those changes when, say, in a peace gathering project where thousands of people are focusing on peace, and you start seeing changes in crime and violence and everything else, when those peace gathering projects end, violence and crime return back to the same level again. So it's not enough to just think it. We have to live it. We have to live that prayer every single day. We have to demonstrate peace. We have to embody it. We have to do it with our eyes open. We have to demonstrate it so that we give others permission to do the same. And so then the question is, then how do you become supernatural? Well, you have to first start doing what feels unnatural. That means when everybody else is in fear, that's when you show courage. When everybody else is hostile and angry, that's the time to show love and compassion. When everybody else is in lack and poverty, that's the time to give. And I think that gives people permission to do the same, because of mirror neurons. We want to emulate that behavior, and it counts the most in those moments. It doesn't count when everything is comfortable and okay. It counts the most when you should be doing something else. And if you're able to go against those years, thousands of years of genetic programming hardwired into our survival centers, all of a sudden other people will begin to do the same, and you will see an emergence of a new consciousness.